Winter is coming! Hi folks, I'm Matt Easton, this is Scholar Gladiatoria channel. So you're watching the movie and TV fight review part of my channel, and first up I want to say I get asked a lot to talk about Game of Thrones, and that's what I'm going to be talking about here. If you're not up to date with Game of Thrones at this point of making this video, that would be Season 6, Episode 1. If you haven't seen it yet, do not watch this video. Stop, turn back now, switch off. Or, if you don't mind being spoiled, or if you just don't watch the series at all, then watch on and have fun. So what I'm going to be doing is talking about a fight in Episode 1 of Season 6 of Game of Thrones, and I'll be analysing some aspects of the fight from the point of view of me being a historical fencing instructor, sometimes TV consultant on that topic. And just to point out as well to some of my viewers, regular viewers and people who comment on my videos, yes, I have mentioned a few times recently I've been working on some TV projects, however none of them are Game of Thrones. I do not work on Game of Thrones, I have never worked on Game of Thrones. I do happen to know a couple of people who have worked on Game of Thrones, but that is not me. So I have no vested interest in this video. I will try to be as honest as possible. Just before I start analysing this specific fight from this episode, I want to say yes, there are lots of other fights from Game of Thrones from the last 5 seasons that I would like to go and analyse at some point as well, and I probably will do. But it takes time, and I don't want this to become the Game of Thrones fight channel. I try to look at other movies and TV shows as well. So, with no further ado, let's go on with some analysis of this fight. So, first up, what we're actually looking at here is the flight of Sansa and Theon from essentially Ramsay Bolton, from Winterfell, getting away from the Bolton soldiers. So they're being pursued. They have fled across a river here, a freezing river, in winter, because winter has come, or winter's on the way still, and the soldiers, the Bolton soldiers, are catching up with them. What happens next is Brienne and Podrick find Sansa and Theon and come to their rescue, and this is the fight that we're going to look at. So the fight is between, fundamentally, on one side, Brienne and Podrick coming in on horseback against Bolton soldiers, also for the most part on horseback. At least they all start on horseback, they don't finish on horseback. The dogs don't play a part, the dogs kind of disappear, and as we'll see, Theon does become a factor in the fight towards the end. Sansa doesn't really do anything. So let's have a look at the fight. So first up there, Brienne charges in with her sword drawn. She doesn't have a helmet on. This is something that I mention a lot in my videos in general, but also especially in regards to TV and film, is like, I know that we need to see who the character is. I know that this is what the audience expects, is someone wearing essentially a costume and their head is exposed, but in a real medieval or fantasy setting, it's really stupid not to wear a helmet. Why does she have full plate armour on all the time and yet no helmet? Pretty much if you were going to wear just one piece of armour, it should be a helmet, and you know, maybe a breastplate or cuirass, or maybe gauntlets next. She's wearing all of this armour the whole time, like she never seems to take it off except for when she sleeps or bathes, and yet she doesn't have a helmet on. This is somewhat silly. Anyway, to the actual fighting aspect, so she charges in, she comes in with what I would call in sabre terms, a cut number 5 perhaps, or maybe a number 1, difficult to tell which. So a cut from the outside line as she rides past. Perfectly fine, no problem with that at all. The guy reels off the back of his horse with the impact. What would this actually do with a sharp sword against someone? Well, it depends very largely on what the person is wearing. So if, as we see here, most of the people wear something like kind of leather or essentially clothes, hopefully if your cut's good it will go through that and cut open, lay open a bunch of ribs. Of course we do know that Brienne's sword is somewhat special. It is Valyrian steel. and we have seen it chop through all manner of things in the past. So we have to assume that whatever a normal sword would do, laying open someone's chest, it would be even more dramatic with the Valyrian steel sword of Brienne. So no problems at all with really what we've seen here. It's a nice bit of stunt choreography. She rode on through. I think this is quite representative of a lot of cavalry combat where you try and keep your horse moving. As soon as your horse stops moving, you're actually quite vulnerable. And most period treatises, if we look at Marozzo or other Renaissance treatises, point out that someone on foot versus someone on horseback, actually, if the horse isn't running around, isn't very mobile, the person on foot has the advantage. So it's very important to keep that horse moving. Little bit different in this situation because at this stage at least, all of the opponents are on horseback. Very interesting fight. Off the top of my head, it's the first time I can think of where we've seen this type of small melee engagement where both groups have been on horseback at the beginning. Very interesting. So let's carry on watching. Right, so just coming in there. So we've got Podrick has basically got engaged with one person on horseback. And you'll see that at this point they're both basically static on their horses. That's absolutely fine. We know that that happened and we know that that's one, if you're only fighting one opponent, which is actually really what Podrick's doing here. He pretty much ignores everybody else and gets locked in with one opponent, as we'll see as we go through the fight. In terms of how he's using his sword and how the other person's using their sword, I have only one real major issue with it, and that is that they are doing this quite a bit with their hands out in front of them. Hands with a medieval cross-hilted sword are very, very, very vulnerable. And for that reason, if we look at the guard positions and the way that a sword is used, often you'll bring the hand back after striking or guarding, you'll bring the hand back to a retracted guard position to get that hand safe. They are doing a bit tip-tap, tip-tap, and I have to say the choreography is not great. It looks a little bit like kids doing sword fighting with sticks, but it's not awful, and I have to say kudos to the editing, because the editing has actually made the fight look more like a fight. If you actually go, hold on, let's use my spidey vision here, spidey sense, and try and remove all of that editing and see what are they actually doing, they're basically both sitting there on the horses going ding, 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 ding. It's not very convincing sword fighting. However, the editing makes it look fine. But I would say for medieval swords, you don't really want to be using it like a sabre out here in front. Sabres have handguards, basket hilt broadswords, they have handguards. Medieval swords do not have handguards, so if you've got bare hands like Podrick has, you don't want to be just standing there doing this with your sword, because you're going to get your fingers lopped off and your forearm all chopped up and all sorts of bad things. So, what we've got to bear in mind in terms of the narrative of the story, and this is at the end of the day a story, it's not a martial arts demonstration, it is a story, it is for fun, I do still enjoy watching it, is essentially Podrick is now engaged with one opponent and locked in with that opponent. Okay, so Brienne now has to fight everybody else. Let's see what happens. Right, we actually saw a nice example there of a hanging guard. You notice Brienne came in and the opponent blocked point down. Perfectly nice. This is called prime in sabre fencing, or hanging guard in backsword systems. Perfectly fine, perfectly nicely done. Let's carry on with the fight. Okay, so Brienne got hit across the breastplate and carried off the back of their horse. There's a couple of things I like about that and I think are really good. Firstly, the fact that she got hit in her armour and didn't get wounded. That is correct, that's what should happen. Armour, newsflash, armour works. Armour protects you from swords fantastically well. Historically speaking, we know that people who wore the top level of armour in the High Middle Ages, in late Middle Ages rather, if we look at the 14th, 15th centuries and indeed into the 16th centuries, we know that they were very hard to kill, and you know, at the Battle of Agincourt, famously lots of prisoners were taken because their armour had protected them really well from all those arrows and swords and stuff. So armour is very difficult to get through, and if you just cut at someone across someone's breastplate, yeah, you're not going to wound them. In fact, you're not even going to hurt them. But what you might do is what happened there. You might carry them off the back of their horse. Now, there's one caveat I'd add to that. Medieval saddles, and bearing in mind this is not medieval history, this is Game of Thrones, it is fantasy. Medieval saddles have quite high front and backs for this very reason, to prevent you from easily being knocked off or falling off your horse. In Game of Thrones, they don't have real medieval saddles, they have more or less modern saddles that are dressed up to look historical. So, in that context, perfectly fine. If you're wearing a breastplate, someone hits you really hard on the chest, what might happen? You might fall off your horse. That's all that will happen, and the only pain that you might suffer is hitting the ground from coming off a horse, which I've been told can be quite painful. And of course you could break your legs and arms, all sorts of things, falling off a horse, or indeed die from falling off a horse, as people do unfortunately every year still today. So I like that. I think from a narrative point of view, the fact that her opponent then dismounts to fight her is interesting, and some people might go, oh well, that's really stupid, he's got an advantage when he's on horseback, why did he dismount? He should have stayed on his horse and then he would have beaten her in the fight. But remember what I said before, actually if we look at historical treatises, we find that when one person is opposed to another one person, actually the person on foot, the active person on foot, as one source I know refers to, has the advantage over the person on horseback. So in groups, a group of cavalry might have an advantage over a group of infantry in some situations, but one-on-one, actually if your opponent is a good fighter on foot, it may well be in your interest to dismount to fight them. So let's carry on and see what happens in the fight. Okay, so just jumping in there, I have to say Brienne's movements are a little bit over the top. They're a little bit drama school. They're like, well, she's supposed to be one of the most awesome fighters in Westeros, okay? She's got a Valyrian steel sword, she's got really good quality armour that presumably fits her well and isn't too heavy, and she's been knocked off her horse, but she's not wounded. Like when she got kicked, what had hurt her? Was she kicked in the face? I'm not really sure. She should have worn a helmet if she was, but I'm not really sure why she's so, like she's either like she's moving a really heavy sword or she's been wounded. I don't think she's been wounded, and I don't think she's got a really heavy sword. So I'm not really sure. I think that was a little bit of overacting there. I've got to say, Gwendoline Christie, fantastic actress. If you ever watch this, Phasma, brilliant. But no, I've got nothing against her. I think she's a really good actress. I just think from a director's point of view, if I was the director here, I would have made her seem a bit more, she's supposed to be badass. She's one of the most badass people in this show. Don't make it look like she's struggling against one of Bolton's soldiers. She should have been like the Terminator. I'm the Terminator. I'm here to rescue everyone. I don't think she should have been like, oh, I'm struggling. I can understand why she did that against the Hound. The Hound is supposed to be one of the other major badasses. This guy, he's nothing. Okay, maybe in the books he is, but he ain't on this. So I think it was a little bit over the top. But anyway, in fighting terms, it's a little bit flaily, a little bit wide-spaced, as we'd say in fencing. But it's okay. Let's carry on with the fight. Yes, I like it. So here we go. Yeah, the active, the good fighter on foot has the advantage over the person on horseback. The person on horseback, yes, they might be on top of a large animal, but if they try and ride past a person on foot, or indeed if the person on foot gets ridden at and they just sidestep, you're actually much more nimble. Humans are quite good, you know, we're quite good on our feet. We can do things like dancing and acrobatics and all sorts of, you know, gymnastics. Horses can't. Yes, horses are big and strong and fast and they can jump, and that's about it. You know, they can't dig or climb, or they can't dance. If you look at dressage, if you look at equestrian dressage, you can do really impressive things with a horse. You can make them sidestep and backstep and kick backwards and forwards and do all sorts of pirouettes and all sorts of stuff. However, they don't do it as well as humans do. So ultimately, even if someone rides a horse at you, which incidentally is what's advised to be done, in the 19th century they advised a cavalryman faced against someone on foot, fighting on foot, not to ride past them and try and cut at them, because then you're essentially giving the person on foot the ability to just guard and riposte, or just hit you with their bayonet or whatever they're using. Whereas if you just ride the horse over them, they've got to kind of run out of the way. But in this case, the person did everything wrong. He rode past Brienne, or Brienne sidesteps, whatever, and she just grabs him and pulls him sideways. Now you might think, a person, especially a woman, no, first of all, Brienne is hardcore, regardless of her gender, but also any person, if you grab someone on horseback and pull them sideways, that's not a direction that a person on a horseback is designed to really resist very well. And in fact, if we look at Fiore de Liberi's treatise from 1410, one technique for wrestling on horseback is to pull someone sideways off their horse. You can use the reins, you can use the stirrup, you can use their own body weight and the fact that they're above the pointed pivot. So this is really good stuff. I really like it. They're showing that a hardcore person on foot can beat a not very good fighter on horseback. It happened historically, and it happens in the show. I like that. Good going. Okay, so I have to say, I feel a bit sorry for Podrick here. I think that Podrick, the actor who plays Podrick, I think he's been given an unenviable task in that he's been given obviously set moves that aren't very imaginative or interesting, and the editor's done a good job of kind of putting them together to make it look a bit more like a fight. But if we just ignore everything else that's happened in this sequence, Podrick essentially rode up next to an opponent and they went like this, ding, 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 for about 5 minutes, ding, 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 and then, and this is one of my favourite things in movies and TV, ding, 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 I know, I'll use the point, ding, 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 point to the chest, and it's like, oh, come on. It's like the only different thing he did was the thing that worked right at the end. And it's usually a thrust, and you know why? Because it's quite easy to make it look like a thrust and put the blade past a person and it looks like you put the blade into the person's body. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, and I'm sure that it's been done in stage and theatrical choreography going all the way back to William Shakespeare's time, and probably further back than that. So ultimately I think it was unfortunate, and I feel a bit sorry for the actor playing Podrick that he wasn't given a better repertoire of moves. And as a fight choreographer or a director or anyone else involved with the show, I would have at least tried to vary it a bit. I mean, maybe he not so confident on the horse, maybe it was, I don't know. Maybe they wanted the focus to be on Brienne, maybe that's it, maybe it's a narrative issue. But from my point of view as someone who likes fencing and weapons and kind of knows a bit about this stuff, it looked very stark to me, because what they did with Brienne looked pretty good, fighty. It may not have looked technically good, but it had the right spirit to it. And then what they did with Podrick was very like ding, 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 ding. Oh, it's time for him to die now. Stab. So I didn't think that was very good. Anyway, let's carry on. Okay, so I have to say, now I'm glad that he got to do some proper techniques and some proper stuff. It was fairly basic. He was just essentially blocking or dodging out of blows, but that fits in with the narrative of what's supposed to be shown here. The opponent's blows, if you notice the way that they usually film these fights in film and TV, they're actually out of distance. So if you notice when he seems to lean back to dodge a blow, he only moves back about 2 inches because he's already out of distance. So for someone who knows about martial arts or fencing, you can see that straight away, that this opponent is doing these attacks, and what Podrick's really doing is just putting his sword there to do the ding, to make contact with the other person's blade. He's not, if he didn't put his sword there, he still wouldn't be hit because he's out of distance. And that's a little bit obvious in this fight. But nevertheless, I thought it was okay. At least he had some different most of them were point down, I think, but he had some different guards, and yeah, that's fine. It's not too bad. I'm not going to overly criticise. It's good fun and it fits with the narrative. Let's carry on. Yay! Theon's back! Theon's back! So for anyone who watches the show or likes even reads the books or likes the story, it's good that Theon's finally kind of risen from his mental enslavement and actual enslavement. For those who watch the show, there's a nice bit of storytelling there as well, of course, and very visual storytelling, because of course that's how Podrick himself saved Tyrion at the Battle of Blackwater. So I think he used a spear, but essentially it was the same thing. We thought, oh no, Tyrion's on his back, he's going to get killed, and then Podrick came along and thrust the guy through the back of the neck, and we've essentially got the same thing here. And I like the way it was done. I mean, Theon's positioning. Interestingly, I think he might be left-handed there. I don't know whether the actor is left-handed, Alfie Allen, but I don't know. But anyway, he's thrust a long sword through the back of the person's neck or head or chest or whatever it was, and he's now standing actually in a longsword fencing guard. There we go. That people who study Lichtenau, the most famous German longsword master. From that tradition, that would be called Flug, more or less. His point's a bit low, but the opponent's now lying on the ground, so you could say that he's tracked the point down to point towards him. But essentially, he is standing on what looks like a longsword fencing guard position, at least from the German traditions. So yeah, so good stuff. That pretty much is the end of this fight, so I'm going to finish there. Overall, to conclude, I would say I really liked what they did with Brienne, which is great because she's probably my favourite character in the entire series. I'm absolutely so happy that Theon has come back, essentially, and that he's gone. I mean, I was quite bored with the character at one point. I felt a bit sorry for him maybe, but I'm glad that he's come back and seems to be coming back to be a useful, functional and potentially quite important character going forwards. I felt a bit sorry for the actor playing Podrick, because I felt that the repertoire they gave him looked a bit crap compared to what the other people got to do. And I really like the actor and I really like that character, so I guess maybe that's why I feel it, because I wanted to see more from him. I wanted him to seem better and do better stuff, and he just ended up looking a bit crap, and I feel a bit sorry for him for that. Sansa didn't do anything, but then I suppose what could she do? Well, maybe she could have picked up one of the swords that were lying around, or I don't know. I kind of feel like Sansa could have done something, but I know a lot of people don't like Sansa, so anyway. And where are the dogs? There were these dogs that are famous for tearing people apart. Theon earlier even makes reference to it. He goes, oh, we've got to cross this river because I've seen what those dogs do to people. Where did the dogs go? They were there 1 second and disappeared the next. Anyway, I hope this has been interesting and fun for you guys. I do more of these movie and TV reviews, and if you're not subbed to my channel, please click subscribe, and I will definitely be doing more Game of Thrones stuff as we go through season 6, but equally I will be going back and looking at Game of Thrones fights from previous episodes. Cheers folks! Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on Facebook. You can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt, support us on Patreon, or follow us on Pinterest. Thank you.